Right, so here we are, a brave new world of getting coffee at home. I had to make my own coffee this morning. I'm not sure I love the idea, but we're doing the best we can. Kelvin, how things?
Not too bad. I think it's obviously a bit of a struggle. So I've got two young kids at home. So really, it's been trying to adapt to working with two young kids at home running around. You see the BBC, the video of the guy with kids running past. That happens on a daily basis. And really, it's trying to figure out how we can still get on with our
Everyone I
lives.
know who has kids who are being homeschooled, they all say that they value teachers a lot more now than they previously did.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. But it's tough. I mean, look, bottom line, we normally send our kids to school, but now we have to be the full-time teachers and lawyers and whatever, we do in our day lives. So
Yeah.
it's required some sort of flexibility in working. I mean, that said, I think everybody is stuck, having to sort of deal with these things.
Well, last time we met each other, you took me to this wonderful place and we had chicken rice. All those places still open, or are they still open for takeaway only, or how's it in real life?
So in Singapore, restaurants, a lot of them are still open.
Okay.
But I think with the takings going down a lot, because they no longer can serve people at the restaurants and they can
Right.
only do pure takeaway. There have been a few other measures, quite interesting reactions to that. Like 2 days ago, they closed the bubble tea. I don't know whether you remember the sort of bubble tea thing.
Yeah.
So when the news was announced, everybody started queuing up at 10 p.m. for their last bubble tea before June. And
Oh gosh. You see, those are the real sacrifices we are having to make.
Indeed. And they closed the barbers as well. So fortunately, I got a haircut just before the...
Oh, just in time. Well, you can see I did not make the cut, so I'll have to find a way. So Kelvin, tell me, working from home has a number of aspects, but in terms of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, has that changed yet? Has that shifted at all?
I think for me, like I said, the biggest impact has been having the kids, two young kids at home, and having to deal with that. So you need to have a fair bit of flexibility in your schedule. You need to sort of plan ahead a little bit with the wife, so that we can both, one of us can deal with the kids while the other is on a call.
Yeah.
But I think the other very significant thing is that I've tried to take the opportunity to move my life online, so to speak, as well. So you're able to access all your files. I mean, I used to be very conscious of security concerns and all that, but now it's survival, right? So my life is now online.
Yeah.
I can access it from my phone when I'm watching over the kids and or a laptop or desktop and whatnot.
Well, I think a lot of construction lawyers, for better or for worse, we have a reputation for not being very paperless friendly. And the reason is, you've got those schedules and drawings and diagrams. And you say, well, we do need actual hard copies. But it's amazing how quickly, at least in my experience, when push came to shove, we had to make do. And a lot of us are trying. But do you think that when this shifts, we'll go back to our paper-heavy practices the same way, or are some of these changes, do you think, are they going to last?
I think there will be some positive impact because, I mean, the reality is that we have paper as a backup. All of us are trying to move towards a maybe not paperless, but less paper sort of work stream. But you do still have one copy of the agreed bundle, maybe not three, but one set of the 86 Arch files at the back, just in case somebody wants to refer to it. So I think this is a big impetus for people to move their lives, digitize it, and work with less paper. Because the other part of it is that in Singapore, we've got measures in place where we're not allowed to go into the office at all.
Right.
That really sort of creates a big problem if you need to print stuff. You need to reach for textbooks. So fortunately, the ones that have already been starting to move their lives online, I'll be better able to cope with these changes.
And what's happening to existing disputes? Are they carrying on? Are they being adjourned? What's happening?
What what I think there's a fair bit of sort of people waiting and seeing what's going on at this point. So in terms of the courts, for example, they're only hearing urgent matters. Everything else has been sort of pushed back. So urgent essential matters, Mariva, and then that sort of applications go on. But the rest of it, they're all going to be pushed back to end of when the circuit breaker is over. The arbitration centers, I hear that there's some stuff going on, but again, with all these restrictions, travel and whatnot, people are tending to sort of take their foot off a little bit and try to vacate their hearings as much as they can.
Yeah.
The one odd area in Singapore is a bit of a quirk. Is really adjudications are still allowed to go on.
Right. Okay.
That's one area where I think it's still pretty much business as usual.
Right.
And they tried to sort of change the logistics so you can submit papers by way of email instead of the paper copies. Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the areas. And then the other thing that's causing a bit of excitement is these sort of, we've got a COVID-19 temporary measures bill. So what that's doing is a sort of suspensory legislation that puts everything on ice.
Everyone's talking about it because it's very interesting, because the approach that you guys have had in the bill, or now the act, I suppose, is not one that's been taken in a lot of comparable places. And I'm intrigued about the suspensory provisions, because it seems to me as an outsider that they obviously are going to be of a huge short-term benefit. But in the long term, do you not think that they open up other questions and issues?
Indeed. I mean, this is quite novel, I think, to all of us as construction lawyers, right? Because normally if you allocate risk in a particular way, you want to hold the parties to their bargain.
Yeah.
But this set of legislation sort of comes in because there's a recognition that perhaps contracts don't quite allocate the risk of such an exceptional event in a fair way. So what the statute is trying to do is to sort of basically keep everybody alive for 6 months. I think that's the sort of underlying theme that you see. So how they do it, for example, 3 big things. One, some sort of moratorium, over proceedings. There are some exceptions to that. 2, for construction, moratorium against calls on performance bonds.
Right.
So you don't end up not taking cash away. And finally, and this is probably the slightly controversial one, to try and say that there's a defense, to an inability caused by COVID.
Yeah.
So if a contractor is unable to deliver during this period of time, then he's got a defense, a statutory defense to claims for breach of contract. And he's also got a statutory defense to liquidated damages claims.
Right. And so, is there any guidance on what caused by COVID means?
So the wording is caused to a material extent,
right? Okay.
By an event. That's the sort of COVID event.
Right.
The definition is actually quite broad because it includes events outside of Singapore.
Right.
And I think the sort of general guidance given in speeches by the minister is that, look, it doesn't have to be a dominant cause, but it has to be a cause. It cannot be a sort of trifling cause. But as long as there's some level of causal effect to it, then they're going to sort of be quite generous, I think, in interpreting what that means.
Right.
And, it's good that you sort of raised that, because the other part of this whole act is that it creates a brand new work stream as well, because a number of people have been asked to be assessors. I'm one of them as well. And these guys are supposed to come up with a sort of quick and dirty determination, to give sort of a fair and just determination within 5 days.
Right, okay.
When you adjust any of the unjust consequences, the unexpected consequences of the act.
And are the assessors, are they like adjudicators, or are they some other thing?
Well, their determinations are reviewable. So if there's Wednesday unreasonableness, then you can go for judicial review. But it's a very low cost. So the cost is $0 for the filing.
Right.
attempt to try and sort of mitigate some of the consequences there. I expect there will, because many of them I think will be lawyers by training.
Yeah.
What they're really trying to do is sort of apply common sense and take off some of the rough edges on the parties that were unexpected when you apply the black letter.
Right. Well, it sounds very interesting. It sounds very bold. And it's the sort of thing that I think Singapore steals a march in everyone in being able to do things of this sort. And good luck with the task. It sounds like you'll have quite a lot of work to do on this job. Are there lots of assessors, or are they just a handful?
I think they're supposed to have appointed 200.
Right.
But I think it's more trying to see the sort of first few cases go through the process, and then we'll be able to have a better grip of what the issues are. I mean, like you say, it's novel, it's new. It's as new to the assessors as it is, to everybody else. Everybody will need to sort of step through the river and figure things out.
Right.
Avoid the sharp stones along the way.
And tell me about this bond business, no calling on bonds. Does that mean that bonds get extended by the period of COVID-19, or is this just a 3-month suspension, but bonds expire when they ordinarily would have expired?
So the period is actually for 6 months.
Yeah, right.
And again, the moratorium against calling on on-demand bonds applies if it falls within certain criteria, such as the contract was entered into prior to 25th March, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But really, the moratorium stops people from pulling the bonds for the 6 months, and then they extend the duration of the bond. What they've not really, I think, thought through entirely at this point is how that might affect the financial institutions who have to extend the bonds.
Yeah, it's
and how you allocate the risk, the sort of risk of the additional costs.
Yeah,
those issues will have to be sort of worked through, possibly at the party level.
Yeah.
If the party is sorted out, then you'll go to the assessors.
Yeah, if I were a bank and the bond was expiring in July this year in its ordinary life, and if I were told that now it's not expiring in July next year, and it now goes into January or February next year, I'd have a few thoughts about it.
Yeah, indeed. And this 6-month period might be extended as well.
Right.
So the 6 months is the initial period. It can be extended up to a year. So, and I think the other element, other than the cost element, is traditionally your on-demand bonds, you pay when you receive a valid call. But now there are conditions. So there's a sort of statutory conditionality. So it puts the bank actually in a very difficult position. Right. Because he has to sort of ponder, does this fall under the Act or not? And so on and so forth. So that analysis is not a straightforward one.
So what do you think happens to hearings and disputes that are currently in the pipeline? When, hopefully not if, but when we go back to normal, what happens? Do we try and reschedule everything, or do we push everything back, or what's the approach being taken in Singapore?
Well, my sense is that, look, people are having a bit of a wait and see approach now, but at some point of time, they're going to sort of their fingers are going to be itchy. They sort of need to go and pull the trigger, and the disputes will come back online. So the good thing is that, in this point of time, we'll sort of figure out how things work, maybe sort of refresh ourselves a little bit. But I believe that the disputes will come back online. The changes, however, what we talked about right at the start of this chat, might be that there'll be more remote hearings. You need to sort of be more nimble. And I think remote hearings brings with it a whole bunch of other sort of issues as well. I think a lot of other people have been talking about it. I think yourself, you've written an article about it.
Yeah.
How are you? Yeah.
We were, it's interesting because we were just coming up with some thoughts as to how it works. In practice, I've had remote hearings, and the reality is, in things like arbitration, we've been doing remote hearings certainly for interlocutories for a long time. So in some ways, a lot of what's happening now is not new, but many other ways it is. And I think the two ways it is completely sort of an entirely new world is firstly, for merits hearings, evidentiary hearings, people are now thinking, well, can we do cross-examination for a number of days remotely? And we've always had the odd expert who couldn't fly, so you had to sneak them in at some point early in your morning, late in the evening, or that kind of stuff, and just did that as a part of a merits hearing. But if that's the case with all your witnesses, then there will be a number of concerns. There will be concerns about fairness. If you think of the average expert in delay matters, you might think, well, some of these people are, they are being kept awake at 10 at night to give evidence. It's not really fair for them. And it's not fair on anyone. So there'll be fairness questions. But also, the day gets extended. And those questions, I don't know, we just figuring them out as we go along. But the other way in which this is a completely new world is in the willingness, at least in the courts of England, to carry on with business as usual. So in the business and property courts here, certainly the attitude is we are carrying on, and they have moved trials online. So it's not just urgent interim applications. It is full-fledged, multi-day, in one case, multi-week hearings that are being moved to virtual hearings, involving lengthy cross-examination, involving lengthy submissions. And it's quite remarkable the pace with which it has happened. A couple of weeks ago, there was an application to adjourn a trial, and the case is called, I think, one Blackfriars. It's long-running litigation. The court judgment is very interesting because they basically said that actually, if you look at the principles behind the lockdown, and I know you guys call it circuit breaker, we call it lockdown. Everyone's got their own terminology. If you look at the ministerial statements, if you look at the principles behind the act, well, we are being encouraged to carry on to the extent that we can. So, in fact, the grounds for adjournment are, if anything, grounds for carrying on with the remote hearing. And that was a very interesting, I think, reflection of the approach that courts here are going to be taking. And I know in many other jurisdictions, courts are closed, some places entirely, some places, as you say, like Singapore, where they're doing urgent matters. But I think, they are going to come back online. And what that does to access to justice, what that does to the idea of justice to be seen and not, not just felt or whatever. Those will be very interesting questions. We'll see how that develops.
Yeah, indeed. And I think you're right in the sense that cross-examining experts, witnesses on video, that's something that we've all been doing for the last 10, 15 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But for me, I find what's going to be a bit of a new area to sort of think about more is how do you persuade somebody on video? I think one aspect of that is, ordinarily you will be listening to the tone, you will have a bit of a conversation, your rapport. But, that level of rapport between you and the judge, that the ability to build that is going to have to be relooked at. How do you do it on a video screen, or worse, it's sort of 3 squares on your computer?
Yeah. There's a loss of a dimension, on screens being two-dimensional. We have this difficulty of not being able to feel the atmosphere in the room. When I first started out as a junior, one of my assigned jobs was to make eye contact with the tribunal and to assess the body language. And so I wasn't the one doing the talking, the tribunal wasn't the one doing the talking, and other people were talking around us. But just to get that sense of the room. is a very important thing, and you can try and do that. And people who are far more experienced than us will tell you that good advocates will always adapt, and they will always figure out. And as long as there's equality of arms and everyone's equally disadvantaged, people will figure things out. But I do think you lose certain things. Obviously, you gain things. There's a huge cost benefit to parties by not flying lawyers and witnesses and tribunals around the world, hotel stays and all that stuff. There's efficiency in that you can do more than one thing at a time if you've got a small interlocutory hearing, for which otherwise you might have had to fly and lose time. So, there are things that are better, but we will lose quite a few things as well. And on the whole, it's just going to be different, I think.
Yep, indeed. Yeah. So I think the other part of it, just to share one thing that I actually picked up, when preparing for this call.
Yeah.
Is having to react to being recorded as well, and looking at yourself. So one of the things I was very bothered with was, when you find yourself tilting in a particular way.
Yeah.
Then you try and correct that, and you tilt yourself further because the image is not mirrored.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I learned is you can actually choose a mirror button on your Zoom.
Oh, can you?
That actually makes it a lot more easy to sort of figure out which side I must sort of tilt.
I've put my settings so that I'm minimizing the top right-hand corner. The best of times, I'd rather not look at myself. But I feel for the person who's subjected to it. But there we are. Well, Kelvin, good catching up. This is a good way for us to stay in touch, and I'd be keen to hear more about your assessor role when it gets going. And I'll let you know how my hearings go. I've got a few coming up, and they are the whole menu of possibilities of remote hearings. Some are in this jurisdiction, some are in cross jurisdiction, some are in arbitration, some in court. So I'll report back.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out, Samar.
Yeah, great catching up.
Had this chance to have a chat.
Bye.